Looking to switch careers and enter the exciting world of real estate in Alaska? Look no further. My name is Jerry Royce, and I've been teaching Alaska sales pre-licensing classes for over 25 years and taught them over 400 times and spent hundreds of hours helping people be able to pass this exam. Over 1,200 people have passed their test here in Alaska to get their real estate career started. We offer a full range of classes as well. We look forward to helping you and walking you through and making this an easy process. Let's take some of the math questions.
When you go to close on a piece of property, one of the things you're going to have to figure out is do the prorations, do the math, because in some cases you have prepaid certain things like taxes, or in other cases taxes have been accruing. In the case of a transfer, if Ryan is going to buy the piece of property from me, if I've already paid the taxes for the entire year and he's going to close this in July, then I want to credit back for the taxes that I paid for the second half of the year that when he's going to be living in the property. Likewise, if taxes are accruing, they don't get paid until the end of the year, and I've been in the first 6 months, when he buys the property July 1st, he wants money for the 6 months that I've lived in the property where I haven't paid the taxes. When we're looking at this proration, the elements of the arithmetic of proration is we got to figure, okay, what's the nature of the item being prorated? And we've got to figure out, if it's accrued, you have to figure out what is the earned amount of accrual, or if it's prepaid, the amount should be refunded. Then we have to look at the arithmetic process that must be used. So an accrued item is a buyer credit. As an example, the taxes, we haven't paid them yet. 6 months of taxes have gone by, and Ryan should get the credit on that if he's the buyer. On a prepaid item, I paid the taxes for the whole year, then I would expect a credit for the amount of taxes that I'm paying during the period of time that he's going to own the property. That's basically what we're dealing with. What we got to do is we've got to figure out then the arithmetic process. How are we going to divide this? Because there's two choices. We can either use the 365-day calendar year, or we're going to use the banking year, which divides the year up into 12 equal parts of 30 days each. So it ends up only being 360 days. Anytime you're dealing with a question on the test, they got to tell you which method is being used, because otherwise there'd always be two answers. They can't do that to you. They'll tell you, is this going to be a calendar year? Is this going to be a banker's year? You got to figure out, okay, here's the taxes, then what do I need to divide them by? And they got to tell you which one are you using. You're going to divide this by the banker's year or by the 365 days. And there's some examples of these questions here in the book. The guidelines most state the seller owns the property on the day of closing, because that's when we're signing everything. The buyer owns it the next day upon the recording of the document, so the prorations are based accordingly. Keep in mind that rent is paid in advance, whereas interest is paid in arrears. When you're dealing with people that are buying a house and they're kind of tight for cash, one of the things to remind them of, because in the back of their mind they're thinking, oh gosh, we're going to close on this on the 20th, and then we're going to have to make the payment on the 1st. No, you're not. You're probably going to have at least 30 days worth of leeway time so that you've got a little bit of cushion there, because people who are accustomed to paying rent in advance don't necessarily understand that once you move into a house, there's no interest due. I loan you money today, there's no interest due. 30 days from now, there's interest due. The interest that is paid on your monthly payment is for the last month while it's accrued. There's a little leeway time there between a renter who thinks they've got to make a payment on the 1st when they just closed on it. You got to let them know you won't have to make that payment on the 1st. It won't be until the following month that you have to make a payment. They go, oh, okay, that gives me the cushion that makes me feel a little more comfortable relative to going forward on this. Taxes are typically paid in advance. Sellers should be reimbursed for the period of time, but again, it depends on where you are. It's both. Sometimes they're paid in advance, sometimes they're paid in arrears. Any question that requires you to create or calculate how you're going to deal with the proration has to tell you all the elements that are appropriate. Are the taxes paid in advance or arrears? Paid in advance. Are we going to use a 360-day using the banker's year, or 365 days? They got to tell you that, and then you do the calculation from there. You'll have to do a few of these proration questions. It's not that complicated. It's just math. Multiplication, division, subtraction, and there's just not that much. It's not really super sophisticated mathematical equations, because we have software that does it for us now. You'll never do these prorations yourself. Once you get into real estate, it's all going to be handled on a settlement statement for you. That's an automated Excel spreadsheet that calculates this out. So you can go in there with your calculator and pretend like you're adding stuff up. You could. It's a great way of stalling so that you don't have to be quite as cute and clever during the closing. Because I run out of jokes after about 20 minutes. I can only be cute and clever for so long. I just want to get this thing done, and it's stress for me because I know there's money at the end of this tomorrow, and I don't want it to blow up at the last minute. I'll be there messing around with the settlement statement and looking at it. I know it's right, but hey, it gives me something to look like I'm busy. More likely where the mistake on the settlement statement is going to be is when you screwed up and didn't bring them the newer copy of the settlement agreement. There's been a change in the transaction transaction, you gave them the original document, and there were some modifications with some renegotiations done a little bit later on after the home inspection was done. You got to make sure you get that into the hands of the mortgage people, because if it changed, we're going to talk about this in the next chapter, if it changed the APR rate by more than 1/8 of a point, it's got to be redisclosed. And you got to have a 3-day waiting period for the buyer. There is a 1/8 change in the annual percentage rate. You can't have them waive it. They can't say, oh yeah, it went up 3%, but it's no big deal. I'll just go ahead and waive that and sign. The bank will go, we're not going to sign this. Federal law requires we give you a 3-day cooling down period. What you want to make sure is that a week before closing, every final document is over at the mortgage company. So if they have to do some calculations and notifications, you've got enough wiggle room in there to be able to deal with it. Otherwise, you can put yourself in a real jam. They find out on Friday, oops, there's a 1/8 point difference in the APR rate. We can't close this on Friday, which means you ain't getting the keys. You ain't moving in this weekend. And now you got all this upset, emotion. Yeah, but the movers are going to be here. It's like, man, you could even lose the deal at that point if you're out of contract. You got to stay on top of this. Make sure your originator has the most current documents so they can handle any redisclosures with enough time that it won't upset the closing on the transaction.
We have additional parts for you to help you study to be able to pass the real estate exam regardless of where you're taking the test.